Listeners are advised that this episode contains some strong language. If you've got kids in the car, you might want to save this one for later. You're listening to Small Business, Big Stories, the Queensland Small Business Commissioners podcast. I'm your host, Dominique Lamb. There are 482,000 small businesses in Queensland and counting. All of them are all facing unique challenges. What they all have in common, of course, is that they're part of families. They have relationships with people outside of their business. But we often don't talk about how small business affects our family life or our home life and the toll it can take on you. Our guest today fearlessly takes us inside her marriage breakdown. If this is something you're going through, I hope this conversation can help both your heart and your business. Yeah, today is a very exciting day because we are speaking with Yasmin Grigaliunas, who is the founder and chief, I'm not even sure really, chief of all things of Circonomy. Yas and I have known each other for some time. She is literally the most tenacious human being I think I've ever come across. And outside of that, people often would describe Yas as either a force or alternatively as too much. Everything that she does, everything that she approaches is because she's just so driven towards an outcome, no matter how bad, no matter how good, no matter how rocky it is. So it is my great pleasure today to be speaking to Yas about her journey with Circonomy.
Thank you.
Tell me about how Circonomy started.
It all started with me wanting to raise money for charity as a triathlete because we were raising money for cancer research. And my tri squad, well, a couple of people had just recently been diagnosed with cancer, and my own mother was diagnosed at 44, and my nan she was diagnosed with breast cancer as well. And then my nan's 4 sisters were all diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. So cancer had always been a part of the conversation around the dinner table in my life since me being a very young girl. So it just spoke to me, and I thought, well, I'm going to raise money. I'm going to contribute to this. And I was selling cupcakes and making brownies, and of course that is not something I'd normally do. I was only getting $5 per piece. And really quickly I thought, how do I raise money without asking people for money? I could feel the fatigue. There's all these different charities trying to raise money, and I was competing for the dollar. And I just came up with a concept of a garage sale, which is not new, but I called it the world's biggest garage sale. And I created a Facebook page, had an event. All my friends donated their product, and I used my own idle assets or dormant goods, the stuff that I wasn't giving away or selling online myself. And I thought I'd raise a few $1,000s, and in the end, in a single day, we raised $15,000 at this world's biggest garage sale back in 2019. And I distinctively remember sitting on the toilet with the $10,000 down my pants at this hall, and I thought, I didn't want it to get stolen, first of all. So then I thought, how do I do this properly? That's actually what I was saying to myself. Well, how do I do this properly? I loved this. I'm doing it again. And so the next year we did a world's biggest garage sale and raised $60,000. The year after that, we did another world's biggest garage sale, raised almost $100,000. And what was happening along the way was businesses were starting to identify assets and products that they didn't want to throw in the bin. And I started to see the real value of the opportunity. And I was asking myself the question, how do I do this as a job? But how do I not utilise volunteers? Because that was how we got things done. How do I do this more than a day a year? And I was using my annual leave to build this event, and I wanted to do it full time. And I thought, well, of course we can do it. I've validated without a business plan that lots of products were available. I've validated without a business plan that the revenue could be used to employ people. And I was really passionate about employing people on the neurodiverse spectrum. I have some personal experiences there. And I thought, imagine creating a business that activated dormant goods for good. That was my tagline at the time. And so in 2017, I quit my job, went all in, no plan B, and started the business. And It's called the World's Biggest Garage Sale Proprietary Limited. It's still called that today, but we trade as Circonomy today, which was really always the vision of the brand. But effectively what we do is we work in the circular economy, hence the word, and we rescue, renew, repurpose, remanufacture and even re-commerce products or goods that would otherwise end up in landfill. So think about our customers are people like Officeworks who have returns, damaged goods, things that lay idle in their warehouse. All of that stuff comes through my company and we repair, renew and ultimately sell that product to put it back into the economy at a really competitive price to make it accessible for consumers. So we've always turned what I call surprise chain into supply chain.
Do people call you mad? I mean, you had a very successful, stable job with quite a large, well-known retail business. Mm. I mean, did you think you were mad or just people just blindly follow?
Yeah, both. So in my previous role, I was a business builder, an entrepreneur. I was trusted and really empowered by the founder and the management team to act like an owner. Those were the words I grew up with those words for 13 years. And so I just kind of got to practice being an entrepreneur there, not realising it. And actually, the World's Biggest Garage Sale is not my first startup. And my first one was a business called School Hours. And it was just after having a baby. And I didn't take maternity leave. I absolutely love working. I've always been the working parent. And so School Hours was created with the vision that it would be family-friendly employment. And we were way too early. I started it with my husband at the time because he was also working flexibly and full-time. And it was really early in flexible working. And what we didn't do right is everything that I learned from to start this new business. What didn't happen well back then was I was too early. My vision has always been too early. I'm an early thinker and super early innovator. Super early with School Hours. There's lots of businesses now scaling that. And in fact, Work 180 started just after us and they have scaled and are very successful. Same sort of concept. But I never got out into the ecosystem. I never used my skills as a storyteller and networker. And at the time we were doing it alone. We didn't really connect. And so when that business closed down, I went back into the workforce, I realised that I am an entrepreneur.
That's really interesting. So we've just commissioned the first research into small business owners' life cycle and mindset in a couple of decades at the Queensland Small Business Commissioner's Office. And it shows us that the most successful businesses are those that lean on their trusted networks. So it's interesting to me that you quite clearly identify that the failure of the first business was that you weren't in the ecosystem, that you weren't leaning on anyone outside of sort of your own private ecosystem. But I guess I just wanted to unpack that because I think, many business owners, whether they're tradies or, whether they're lawyers or whether they're hairdressers, typically there's a second person if it's a family-owned business, right? There's normally a partner of some description that's there. And I think there is a perception that if you've got that partnership that you're not on your own. How does that dynamic play out in terms of your own sort of family life experience?
Yeah, so I talk really openly. I'm no longer married. I was in that relationship for 25 years. It was a 23-year marriage, more than half my life, a very loyal, dedicated, monogamous, one-eyed, all for him woman. And I happen to be the working parent. I'm still the working parent. But to answer your first question, I quit my job in 2017 and with the intention that at the time we were going to build this business together. And it wasn't too long after really, I literally pitched my pants off, wore the garage sale shirt everywhere, went into every room, knocked on every door, picked up every phone, like I was the hunter. And not to go, I'm going to build this business and be a McMonster, but actually to connect with the network and to tell the story because I wholly and solely believed I was onto something. And I knew that your network is your net worth. When I pitched to go into the River City Labs Accelerator, which was a tech accelerator, investing $100,000 back in 2018 to take 6% of your company, and there were 8 companies that got selected, we had to go around and pitch at the tables. And at the time, we were still together and he was still with me side by side. We went and pitched together. The revenue I'd made over the last 3 years was more than any of the other companies collectively had made. So I thought they'd be silly not to pick me. So anyway, they picked me. And then the day of going in to sign the paperwork, Lee had an acute depression episode and was not okay. And I remember crying that day to the mentors to say, I don't think I can do this. I'm now a solo founder. I'm a founder. And founders statistically don't succeed. And so, to be honest, that was a real turning point. That day was a turning point for me. I had a job to do. This was my business, and I am absolutely fiercely going to build it. I'm going to ensure my family are safe and secure and happy and okay as best as they could be based on what they were just about to go through. And I did my job, and I did my job well. I literally probably lived at River City Labs mostly for the next period of time, and I connected with every single person. I was the most coachable founder. I would sit in the front row, ask the first question, attend every event. And I think for business owners, we all think we have to do it by ourselves. But actually, the greatest growth in businesses that I've seen along the way has been those who don't have all the answers but are not scared to go and ask for the help, even from people who are going to tell you really hard to your face that it sucks.
The one thing that potentially was going to derail you was actually home life. We sort of fast forward, you went through the accelerator. Obviously there was backing there. As you said, you showed up, you made those connections. And what happened? I mean, there was a time where Lee came back into the business, not only as your business partner, but also as your husband. What does that dynamic look like when you're scaling?
Oh, it was terrible. It was the worst experience. Looking back, I thought it was the right thing. Like, he wanted to come. I said, do you want to come back to this role? Like, he had a number of years off. He wasn't able to work. He was absolutely not okay. I was really open about, is this the right place for you? It's nothing like it's not the garage sale anymore. I'd already registered the brand Circonomy back in 2018. That was the vision. I knew where we were going to go. And to be honest, in hindsight, I look back and had we kept building the business together, it would have failed. And so that's a hard thing for me to say because it comes with an element of, I just needed everyone to get out of my way and I had to build it on my own. But often founders are the visionaries, and founders are often misunderstood. But founders do know the answer, and they know it in their gut and their heart, or the heart and the gut, the heart I like to call it. But often the head gets in the way. And most great businesses have a visionary and an integrator. And in theory, Lee was, potentially able to come back in and be an integrator. But it just didn't go down well. And what started to happen was the vibration of the instability in our partnership and our relationship was having ripple effects in the business. It was stifling growth. I was being challenged on things, and I love to be challenged. Let's just make that really clear. I love to be challenged. But I was being challenged on things that were like so 5 years ago that it was like fit in or
go.
FIFO, basically. So it didn't work. And our marriage broke down around the company. And the marriage was always going to fail. And in hindsight, it was really over before the business even started. And that's by Lee's own admission. I was probably a bit blind to it, being the parent that went out to the workforce, and I didn't know all the things that were going on at home. But ultimately, I remember the day. So I, of course, monogamous, passionate, everything can work. There is no giving up, for better, for worse. We said that to each other. So in the purity of my heart, which is extremely soft and warm, I'm like, let's go get counselling. You've suffered through depression. We have had our worst. Neither of us was doing the wrong thing outside of the relationship. Neither of us was cheating to the person to their face or behind their back. But we were not connected and united. And it was impacting me and my health mentally. And I was really frustrated by him not seeing the vision of the business. And I was like, I'm going to lose my business and my company and my marriage. I was going to lose everything. And I thought, no, I'm going to save the marriage. This is the most important thing. So we invested in a counsellor who actually counselled a friend of mine whose husband didn't do the right thing by her. And they came through it. And I thought, if they can come through that, we haven't done that. So this is going to be easy. So we went into counselling, and of course, I'm super coachable. The counsellor said, "Have you heard of Gottman? This is what the Gottman theory is. And if you typically have these 4 horsemen in your relationship, 93% likely to fail." And we had the 4 horsemen, which are defensiveness, stonewalling, typically the male traits, and criticism and contempt, typically the female traits. And I'm like, yep, I am being a criticising, contemptuous bitch right now, and I need to change. So, of course, instantaneously, overnight, I changed. And for the next few months, we continued to go to counselling, and the counsellor told me I was not allowed to read ahead, Google or look up Gottman and go ahead. I had to stay side by side with Lee on this. And so I did, very coachable. Anyway, long story short, by maybe the 4th or 5th session, we're back in the room together, and I could see his body language was extremely nervous. And that was the day he said the words, "Yaz has done everything. She's a great executor. I would back no one more than I would back Yaz. You've asked her to get rid of contempt and criticism," and these are not his exact words, but it was the feeling I felt. "She's nailed it. I have my wife back. But if I have to do all this work on rebuilding our marriage, I'd like to do it with someone new." And those were the words he used to end our marriage that day. And I was like, what? Is this the big D word? I sat there, and the counsellor said, "Lee, I need you to say what it is that you're really saying." And he said it. And in hindsight, I'm actually really proud of him, because I wouldn't have ended the marriage. I would have done the work. And we needed to end the marriage. And it took a brave, courageous, very deep movement for him to do that. I was prepared to shut the company down, and because I'd just said no to an acquisition offer. Someone wanted to buy the business, and I'd said no to that. And I knew I needed to raise capital, but the divorce dropping happened within days of saying no to the offer, and then me thinking, well, I've got to get ready for a capital raise. And I thought, this is the sign. Now it's time to walk away, shut the business down, end my marriage, somehow work out how to unravel 25 years of togetherness, and go get a job. Who am I going to call? That was where my brain was. Who am I going to call to go work for them? And people like Cisco, Data3, all the people who had supported me were like my number one list, people on the list. But I didn't make the call. And I Googled divorce, and what I read crushed me. And I thought, there has to be another way. So I just designed another way. I created my own system and process to help me manage my divorce. And it took me through a really great structural process. And I know it sounds psychotic, but I didn't like the negativity on Google, and I was not going to go down that track. I felt like it would be really bad for my life if I had to follow what the world was telling me this was going to be like. And I did not want to go that way. So I just designed a process, created a system, and decided on the back of a mentor saying, you're going to lose your marriage and you can't control that. But do you really want to lose your business? And the answer was no.
I've watched you capital raise and I've seen nothing like it. And just, you know, for everyone listening, to be really clear, it's something like less than 8% of female founders are able to raise capital. There's actually a $1.7 trillion deficit in terms of what is invested in women and female founders worldwide. And we know for every dollar that you invest in a female-led business, you'll get 78 cents in return versus 31 cents for every male business. So it makes economic sense to back women running businesses, but it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen in Australia. I mean, I know you love a race, right? And I know you love feedback. Like for you, when you say, you know, I love to be challenged, you know, yes, feedback is the breakfast of champions.
It is.
I've never met anyone that has an ability to sort of assess and review their own behaviours. So basically you designed a model, you cut out all of the emotion or found a way to manage the emotion in what was a healthy strategy for you. What do you do with the business, which is the other part of your heart?
So I want to make it clear that the emotions were there. My first stage, and I'll just share the first stage today of the divorce strategy, which wasn't a strategy at the start. It was like, I've Googled, I need to get the Post-it notes out. I literally got the Post-it notes out.
Yeah, you did a growth mindset.
I did.
Process around managing a divorce.
I did. So the first phase was called Gasp. And because I love poems and poetry, Gasp is an acrostic poem, like your name. So Yasmin, It used to be the school thing you had to do. Well, GASP were the words grief, anger, shock, pain. And they were the real emotions I felt. And I sat in GASP for a few days. So GASP became that first strategy and structure for me to just feel the pain. And I actually moved out of my family home, rented an apartment at Kangaroo Point, lived on my own, and it became my capital raise cave. The capital raise cave became my safe space where I could develop that process of divorce, own the strategy of how I was going to walk through it. That's where it was born. And then I just sat on that process, had it up on the wall. At the same time, on the other wall with the Post-it notes, had the names of every investor that I wanted to phone and connect with. And I couldn't fly because of COVID at the time. And all the people that I wanted to have a conversation with about raising capital for my business on the back of growing $1 million the year before in revenue during COVID. So I felt like I had all the proof and I had all the ingredients. Yes, my marriage was falling down around me, but that was only one component of who I am.
A lot of people now will be going through a divorce with their partners where they've run businesses, for a short or a long period of time. What's your one tip for someone going through a divorce and trying to retain their business?
Yeah, I'd probably have 2 tips. So I'll ask for forgiveness over permission. If you feel like you know that you're likely not going to be together, start much earlier than I did.
To get a lawyer early is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, actually admit to yourself as well. I didn't admit to myself and I'm grateful Lee did. But just if you're feeling the rumblings, I asked another founder recently, are you happy? And because I'm so happy, and I said, are you happy? And within a week she had told her husband it was over because she had been rumbling around it for years. She's also going through a similar situation with her small business. So my actual real hot tip is definitely get a great lawyer that aligns with your values. My first lawyer that I had at the beginning, where I wanted everything to be amicable, and I was like, here you go, here's my offer, proactive, let's make it amicable. I don't want to go to court. No one wants to spend that money. We didn't have that money to spend. My offer was rejected, sadly. 12 months later, I got a better lawyer, more aligned to my values, and really took control of the negotiations. Like, I've made this offer. I'm now going to make you one more opportunity before we go to court, and court, here's what it's going to cost, and I just set it all out on paper. In fact, I don't have any conversations with Lee about our legal matter. It all goes through our lawyers, and I would say just find a lawyer that is values aligned and spend the money. It's worth it.
I think, the thing that people don't anticipate or understand in a marriage or any relationship breakdown is that all bets are off the table. The person that you were in a relationship with no longer exists.
Yes.
So whilst you might be like, I don't want to go to court, I don't want to be difficult, it will be difficult.
Oh my God.
So it's actually just easier if someone else is doing the difficult for you.
It's a business deal. You need to consider what the deal is and divorce yourself from the emotions because the emotions will destroy you.
We have a question from our mailbag. I'm a female founder. What are your tips for raising capital in Australia?
Okay. Tip number 1 is please don't ever say you have fucking imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Like, don't.
Like, not in the pitch or
don't
just
say
generally
Don't
ever?
believe it. Like, what you believe, like the stories you tell yourself become your truth. I have imposter syndrome. I'm diminished. My body language just changed. I'm getting down low. No, I don't have imposter syndrome. I'm a tall poppy. Chop me down. I will grow again. You should invest in me. Don't say you have imposter syndrome or self-deprecate, number 1. Number 2 is please don't buy into the narrative that female founders get 2% of venture capital globally. Instead, find the positive statistics. Female-founded ventures return 36% higher returns than their male-led counterparts. So for me, there's the metric. I'm a founder. I don't even call myself a female founder. I guess the final tip would be is to do it your way. I've never raised capital by flying around the country to meet with 100 investors who are on the investor list. My business would have died if I did it that way. So instead, I decided to create an event. No one told me how. No one taught me how. I just had an event, rang all my networks, said, can we hold this at your space? And invited people in to talk about the sector I worked in, to talk about social enterprise and circularity, and to talk about retail, and to talk about investment, and to actually, I curated an event where it wasn't all about rah, rah, Yas rocks. It was all about this ecosystem and industry is a $4.5 trillion industry. I took away the bias. So I would just say probably, if I was to summarize that well, don't buy into the bias and create your own way of raising capital. You can actually create something new. You've started a business, you've founded it, you're an ideas generator. Don't jump on the bus and bandwagon of that bro culture to go and pitch 100 investors.
But you also did it differently too, right? So, you know, to answer that question, you got other people to pitch your business.
I did.
Because you knew not everyone
It was going to buy
was going to buy into you,
they
right?
would not.
So you found men, women, added diversity, and you pitched differently.
I did. I knew that, let's be real, if I strip it back to the actual begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey, if I had stood up as a mid-40s female founder, called the world's biggest garage sale, dealing with secondhand dirty stuff with no tech platform, and I'm highly confident, competent and driven with a voice that's often too loud and too much based on other people's perceptions, I would have turned off 95% of the room before I even finished slide 2. So I thought, well, I want to keep this room captive. I am investable and you should be listening to me all the way through to the end of my 5-minute pitch, but I'm going to go right at the end. After all these other rock stars who you know, trust and love are going to tell you the why, I think is capital raising. And capital raising is no different to dating, right? And I've learnt that now being a single woman, right? 2.5 years in, I'm not really a dater. But and I won't go on apps, oh my God, punch me in the face, I would never do it. But what I've seen and observed in that ecosystem of the dating culture these days is that it's like swipe, 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 swipe. Let me look for someone better, go, go. And there's all this bias and discrimination.
What's your business mantra?
Oh.
You have a lot of mantras,
I do.
right?
I think, well, I say love is the next disruptor in business. I said that years ago. And I believe that business success is a feeling and that metrics matter and we have to make money, but moments matter more. And if we focus on the moments, then the metrics will multiply. I suppose at the core, I believe in relational value more than transactional value, because if you look after the relationships, the money will follow. And I think that empathy, love, trust, all those feeling words that don't often sit around the boardroom table belong up front at the boardroom table. So I would say to, especially, you started the question with what advice do I have for female founders, is own your feelings and don't leave them at home for your family. Actually bring them into your business and watch your business soar.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know there's lots of debate about what you're going to do about your surname, but I think we'll just go with you're just Yaz. Similar to Madonna, it's just Yaz.
Yes. Yes, although I will let me tell you the story I've told my children, and I'm absolutely considering it. Because my middle name is Lee, someone suggested, why don't you use your middle name as your last name? And I'm like, I can't.
You can't.
My middle name is Lee, and I was married to Lee. And then my married name is Grigaliunas, and it has been my name for 23 years, or 25 years now. My maiden name was Mills, which I was never really connected to because my dad was never really around, and it's his name. I contemplated Belle, which is my mum's maiden name, and Libby, my daughter's middle name. But I actually have landed on the most vibrating one so far that's sitting best with me, that I'm at least got on the backlog, is Queen, because then I can be Yaz Queen.
Oh my God, that's hot off the press, people. If you're listening, you heard it here first. She's changing a surname, Yaz Queen.
Well, how cool is it?
I love it.
It rolls off.
I get a tattoo. Just like Constance Hall, right? That'd be great.
I could do that too.
You could.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Small Business Big Stories. It's a rare thing to have someone so honestly and openly discussing divorce. I hope today's discussion finds the people who need it. And for more inspiration on how to transform your small business, keep tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favourite platform. And if you have a business question for myself or my guests, we'd love to hear from you. Just follow the link in our show notes and send us an email. I'm Dominique Lamb, the Queensland Small Business Commissioner. Until next time.